Zen Buddhism and Nestorianism. The conflagration at the end of the Eon. This time, let's look at the koan, the Blue Cliff Record, Case 29, DaSui and the Kalpa Fire, Jesus' Doomsday Prophecy, and the origins of anti-Semitism. The conflagration at the end of the Eon. Once upon a time, a monk asked Zen master, DaSui Asian, when the conflagration, at the end of the Eon, is inflamed, the whole universe will be destroyed. I wonder if this one will also be destroyed or not. The monk asked, on the cosmology of ancient India, which describes the end of world, as everything is burnt up by the great Kalpa Fire, conflagration, if this one, that is, the original face in terms of Zen Buddhism, or the Spirit of Truth, in other words, the Holy Spirit, in terms of Christianity, is also destroyed, at the end of this world. It may be mentioned here that, Zen Master, DaSui, from Yending County of Dongchuan Prefecture, in Sichuan Province, had called on more than 60 men of knowledge nationwide, including Wei Shan Lingyu, during the later period of the Tang Dynasty, and the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, in China, and eventually received the Dharma Mind Seal from Master, Zhangqingdan, a disciple of Baizhang Huaihai, and served as the abbot of a temple of Mount DaSui, in Sichuan Province. Four great epochs. In ancient Indians are said to have thought that, this world, is consisting of 3,000 large worlds, each composed of 1,000 small worlds, and it is destined to pass through 4 great epochs, that is, 1. Krita Yuga, epoch of creation. 2. Treta Yuga, epoch of preservation. 3. Dwapara Yuga, epoch of destruction. And 4. Kali Yuga, epoch of emptiness. And everything is finally burned up by Kalpa Fire, the conflagration at the end of the age. Brandishing the cosmology of ancient India, the monk asked DaSui if the original face, the fundamental philosophy of Zen Buddhism, will also be destroyed. However, Sui answered simply, destroyed. The monk said, if so, then will it go with the other? It means, if it will disappear, together with this world's. Sui said, you are right. It will go along with the other. Zen Master, Xiushanzhu's answer. By the way, during the Northern Song era, another monk made the same question to Master, Suizhou Xiushanzhu, a disciple of Master, Danxia Zichun. Shanzhu answered, it's not destroyed. The monk said, why isn't it destroyed? Shanzhu said, because it's the same as the universe. From the general common sense, Shanzhu's answer is logically inconsistent. Anyway, DaSui said, it will be destroyed, like the universe. But Shanzhu said, it will not be destroyed, because it's the same as the universe. The teachings of Zen Master Tuzi. Since the monk didn't understand what DaSui said, he inevitably had this matter on his mind, and went all the way to Mount Tuzi of Tongqing Prefecture, at Shuzhou, in Hunan Province to visit Master Tuzi Datong, who was a disciple of Master, Chuiwei Wuxue. Tuzi asked him, where did you come here from? The monk said, from DaSui in western Sichuan. Tuzi said, what did DaSui have to say? The monk then recounted the former conversation. Tuzi burned incense, and bowed, and said, a living Buddha has appeared, in western Sichuan. As for you, hurry back to him. The monk hurried back to DaSui, but Sui had already passed on. What an embarrassment for this monk. Comment by Zen Master Shuedo Zhongxian. Hence Shuedo Chongxian, the commentator of the Blue Cliff Record, in which this koan. Koans are subjects which Zen masters give their students, in the meditation hall. Is recorded, made following his verse. In the light of the conflagration, at the end of the Eon, he poses his question. The patch-robed monk is blocked by the double barrier. What a pity for him, bounded to a single phrase, it follows the other. Eagerly, he traveled out and back solitarily, for 10,000 miles. Shwedo pities on the monk, who was blocked, by the double barrier of words, be destroyed and not be destroyed, and was bewildered by a single phrase, it follows the other, and traveled out and back alone, for 10,000 miles, but he also seems to pity Zen priest, in general. Jesus' Doomsday Prophecy. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher! What massive stones! What magnificent buildings! Do you see all these great buildings?" Replied Jesus, "Not one stone here will be left on another, every one will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, opposite the temple, Peter, James, John and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are all about to be fulfilled?" Then Jesus said to them. Gospel of Mark chapter 13 verses 1-5. My words will never pass away. Because those will be days of distress, unequaled from the beginning, when God created the world, until now, and never to be equaled again. Gospel of Mark chapter 13 verse 19. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Gospel of Mark chapter 13 verses 31-32. Daniel's prophecy. The Gospel of Mark chapter 13, verse 14, which says, "When you see the abomination that causes desolation, standing where it does not belong?" Let the reader understand. Then, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Is thought to be a prophecy of the outbreak of the Jewish war, with the book of Daniel chapter 9 verse 27 in mind. The abomination of desolation will appear on its wings, until the appointed end comes upon the desolator. After suppressing 3 revolts in the Jewish province. The First Jewish-Roman War 66-73 AD. The Second Jewish-Roman War 115-117 AD. And the Third Jewish-Roman War 132-135 AD. The Roman Empire changed the name of Jerusalem to Palestine, banned circumcision, and prohibited Jews from entering the city, which led to the Jews being dispersed throughout the world. Separation of Judaism and Christianity. It is clear that the high priestly family and the Sanhedrin were closely involved in Jesus' debut in the religious world, through the testimony of John the Baptist, at Bethany. The cleansing of the temple, at the Passover festival, which was modeled after the Hanukkah tradition. And the founding of the Jerusalem church, 1.5 months after the crucifixion. However, after the First Jewish War, Rabbi Gamaliel, a member of the Sanhedrin, and a Jewish elder, excluded the Gospels from the Bible scriptures, declared Jesus' teachings heresy, and broke up the relation with Jerusalem church, and relations between Jews and the early Christian church rapidly deteriorated. Anti-Semitism of the Gospels. It is not surprising that the Holy Gospels, compiled during this period, contain content hostile to Jews and Jewish believers. The Jews, who were driven out of Judea and Jerusalem, were scattered all over the world, but what is interesting is that, while the Jews, who headed west, maintained their ethnic and religious identity, the Jews, who headed east, assimilated and integrated beautifully into the customs and culture of China, Southeast Asia, and Japan. The teaching of contempt. After the Second World War, Jules Isaac, the French Jewish historian, who survived the Holocaust, but lost his wife and daughter, in Auschwitz, set himself to discover the roots of anti-Semitism, tracing it back to the early history of the Church. Isaac charted the tendency of early Christian texts to blame Jews collectively for the death of Jesus, and to see Judaism as a failed relationship between God and humanity. He called this the teaching of contempt. St. Paul focused on the theme of the failed relationship between God and humanity in Old Testament and introduced the story, saying Jesus was crucified to restore this relationship in his epistles. And the story became the main theme of all the Gospels afterwards. However, from the description of the Apostolic Acts, such faith seems to have been fostered long ago among Hellenic believers, such as Stephen, perhaps from before the birth of Jesus. However, without Paul, it would not have been fruited. After the Jewish War, because the followers of the primitive church, who had escaped from Jerusalem city just before siege by Roman army, were boycotted from the Jewish community as traitors, the honeymoon between the primitive church and Judaism was over. This too seems to have fostered the tendency of the Gospels, compiled after the war, to blame Jews collectively for the death of Jesus. On the other hand, the conflict between Hellenists, non-circumcision believers, and Hebraists, circumcision believers, in the Gentile church, persisted after the death of Paul and disappearance of the Jerusalem church. Perhaps as a result of this, neither James nor Paul, but Peter, was canonized as the first pope of Roman Church. Wandering Ahasuerus. On the way to the hill of Golgotha, carrying the cross, Jesus exhausted, and stopped by the door of a Jewish cobbler, called Ahasuerus, and asked him a cup of water. But the Jew drove him along wickedly with these words, Go, you tempter. Then Jesus kept his eyes on Ahasuerus for a while, and answered him, I will go, but you must walk around the earth, and never rest, until my second coming, in the last judgment. It is said that Ahasuerus, who had been exiled from his native country, was witnessed all over Europe until the 18th century, which was, even after 1,000 and some hundreds of years later from it. According to a paper recorded in the KO Associated Repository of Academic Resources, which was published in 1968 by Mr. Hideneo Arai, who also served as an honorary professor at KO University, under the background of Jewish persecution by the Crusaders in the early 11th century, similar fables, based on the wandering Jew, appeared in various parts of Europe from the early 13th century. After a German church issued a pamphlet entitled A Jew Named Ahasuerus in 1602, the story of wandering Ahasuerus seems to have spread not only in Germany, but also in the whole world. And the feature of this story is that there is a lack of salvation as a fundamental idea of Christianity, according to the article. A rabbinic delegation presents Pope with Jewish response to Nostra Aetate. A rabbinic delegation visited the Vatican on August 31, 2017, and presented Pope Francis with Jewish response to 1965, the Declaration on the Relation of the Church with Non-Christian Religions, Nostra Aetate. The 9-page response, titled Between Jerusalem and Rome, Reflections on 50 Years of Nostra Aetate, which is signed by the Chief Rabbinate of Israel, the Conference of European Rabbis and the Rabbinical Council of America, was made to commemorate, decree, among other things, exonerating Jews as a whole for Christ's death. However, it took 2 years for them to complete the response. The teaching of contempt, and Vatican II. According to Mr. Jonathan Henry Sachs, professor of law, ethics and the Bible, at King's College London, who served as the chief rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth, from 1991 to 2013, Nostra Aetate, transformed relations between the two faiths so that today, after centuries of estrangement and hostility, Jews and Catholics meet not as enemies, but as cherished and respected friends. It was the result of the meeting of two remarkable men. One was the French Jewish historian, Jules Isaac, who survived the Holocaust, but lost his wife and daughter in Auschwitz. And another was Pope John XXIII, a man of courage, who during the war had saved thousands of Jewish lives. After the Second World War, Isaac set himself to discover the roots of anti-Semitism, tracing it back to the early history of the Church. Isaac charted the tendency of early Christian texts to blame Jews collectively for the death of Jesus, and to see Judaism as a failed relationship between God and humanity. He called this the teaching of contempt. Isaac's work was read by Pope John XXIII. In June 1960, the two men met, and the Pope resolved to re-examine the Church's attitude to other faiths, Judaism in particular. He convened the Second Vatican Council in 1962. Thus began the process that led to Nostra Aetate, though John, who died in 1963, didn't live to see its completion. The history of the dialogue between Christianity and Judaism. According to a report titled The History of the Dialogue Between Christianity and Judaism, from the Second Vatican Council to the end of the 20th century, written by Mr. Mikio Wada, chief priest of Church of the 26 Martyrs of Japan, Seikheim Church of Archdiocese of Osaka, the Nostra Aetate Declaration was largely responsible for the efforts of three prominent people: Pope John XXIII, who convened the Second Vatican Council, Pope Paul VI, who closed the Vatican Council, and Cardinal Augustine B., who worked hard to prepare the Judaism Clause, the Chapter 4 of Nostra Aetate. The dialogue efforts between the Catholic Church and Judaism continued even after the Second Vatican Council, and was further promoted, especially by the appearance of Pope John Paul II, from Poland, who had experienced the terror of Nazi. At a press conference, on March 16, 1998, the Holy See's Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews presented for publication the document, We Remember, a reflection on the Shoah, under the approval of Pope John Paul II. This is called the Shoah document. Pope John Paul II also admitted the past crimes committed by Church, confessed, especially the crimes committed against Judaism, and delivered a sweeping apology during a public Mass of Pardons on the 12th of March 2000. Advice of Professor Sachs. Professor Sachs says, rarely has this been more important than now, when religiously motivated violence is bringing chaos and destruction to great swathes of the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Asia. Christians are suffering, so are Muslims, and so are Jews. What we need now is a new and broader Nostra Aetate, bringing together all the great faiths in a covenant of mutual respect and responsibility. We need leaders from every religion publicly to declare that much of what's being done today in the name of faith is in fact a desecration of faith and a violation of its most sacred principles. It took the Holocaust to bring about Nostra Aetate. Let's not wait for another crime against humanity and God to bring us to our senses. For though we are different, we are each in God's image. The Book of Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, we honor him by honoring all humankind. Zen Buddhism and Nestorianism, Acts, Paul, and Genjo Koan, chapter 3, the conflagration at the end of the Aeon.